Here we have Andre, and today we're going to be creating a low afro look with a taper. So first of all, I'm going to comb out the hair with the afro comb, pulling it from the scalp to the tip. So on this cut, I'm going to start with the top first. I've got my number 6 guard on my clippers and just moving that back through the hair. So now I'm moving on to my number 4 guard, and I'm just working with the grain on the sides, just removing a little bit of the weight but not too much of the length. And now just dropping down to my number 3 guard, again just moving around the edges, just making it nice and soft before I start fading. Now I'm going to start with my 0 guideline at the back of the neck. First of all, starting in the center, then moving to the left and also to the right. Now I'm just using my clippers to make my 0 guideline on the side. So as you can see, I'm creating like a nice arch, almost like a circular shape cut out, just to help keep the weight going behind the ear and also towards the temple, so we get a nice outline. Now I'm going to go to my number 1 guard, just working over that 0 guideline at the neck taper. I'm making this about a finger width deep, so not going too high or leaving the line too low, giving myself a nice space to create the fade. And now I'm using my 0.5 guard, just following the same process, just underneath my number 1 barrier line that I've already created. Now I've taken off my 0.5 guard, and now I'm just working back down towards that 0 line, moving through the gradients of the lever from 0.25 all the way back down to the 0. Now I'm using my number 2, just working over that 1 line and up into the number 3 that I did previously. Now I'm going to use my number 1 guard and open up the lever and just really concentrate on knocking that number 1 barrier line out now. Just using the edge of my clipper, angling it as I go down towards the ears, because I want to keep that shape towards the edges so we can do a nice shape up later on in the cut. And then I'm going to drop it down and close the lever to the flush number 1 and really work out that line. And now we're going to follow the same process as we did at the back on the sides, going in with my number 2 at first. Then I'm going to use my number 1 guard, again following the same shape with the arch that I created with the 0. Working back down to my 0.5 guard, keeping that under the number 1. And then down to my open guard, working with a 0.25 and then down to the 0, just to knock out that 0 line. Then I'm going to use my 1.5 guard all the way open before dropping it down to my flush 1.5. Then down to my number 1 guard, open the lever all the way, working really firm over that number 1 line, and then finally closing the lever and using the number 1 to finally knock out the line. And now I'm going to repeat the exact same process on the opposite side. So now I'm just going to move on to edging up now around the ear, starting at the bottom and working my way towards the top of the ear and around. And now you can see where I created that nice kind of arch earlier on when I was doing the 0 guideline. The shape this creates with the lineup gives a more vivid look to it. Now moving on to the lineup at the front of the head, working from the recession area down to the temple, and then creating a nice arch, working backwards towards the taper. I'm just going to repeat this same process on the opposite side. Now moving on to the front of the hairline. Before I go in with my trimmers, and line the edges up. I'm going to remove some of the weight at first. Going in with my number 3 guard, just removing the curls, helping control it before I go in and line up the edges. So I'm going to start centrally and then work my way across, getting my line as straight as possible, working from the center to the side and then going back to the center and then going to the opposite side. Now moving on to the beard, I'm just going to open my lever all the way to a 0.5, working all the way across the chin area up to the cheeks, and I'm just going to fade up into the taper that we created earlier on. So now I'm moving on to my razor, just to remove all the stubble and really tighten up that final finish on the shaper. Just going over any lines that we have created with our trimmer previously. So now I'm going to comb out the hair again with the Afro comb and refine our clipper work with some nice freehand scissors. Just working all the way around the head, making sure the shape is perfect. So now I'm just going to connect the fade into the rest of the cut and refine some of the clipper work with some scissor over comb. Here we have our low Afro look with the side taper going down to skin, also a taper at the neckline, and our beard trimmed down to a 0.5 and faded back towards the taper.